front, Israel is insisting that Turkey not send troops to be part of the international stabilization force in Gaza. And Defense Minister Katz went so far as to tell President Erdoğan that he will see Gaza only through binoculars. And finally, the top other idea being suggested by the United States and Turkey is that these terrorists will commit not to return to terror activities, hand over their weapons, and receive a pardon from Israel. Set the stage for a return to security in southern Israel. And on the diplomatic front, according to a Palestinian source that is involved in the negotiations, it is specifically Turkey that is applying the main pressure on Hamas to stay on track with the ceasefire plan, and the United States is supporting Turkey in this position. That's the good news, but when it comes to some bad news for Israel, this is what it is, because America is putting pressure on Israel, and that includes pressure to allow a safe passage for 150 trapped terrorists in Rafah in the Gaza Strip back to the Gazan side for the second phase of the ceasefire deal to begin. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to discuss this situation with the Trump administration envoy Jared Kushner this week. One idea that reportedly is being floated is for these terrorists to be exiled to a third country, but so far no one is willing to take them in. And another idea being suggested by the United States and Turkey is that these terrorists will commit not to return to terror activities, hand over their weapons, and receive a pardon from Israel. And in a related story, a Qatari aid shipment that entered Gaza, coordinated with an Egyptian group, revealed broad economic political cooperation between Cairo and Doha aimed at establishing joint influence in the Strip's reconstruction process. But Qatar and Egypt are not the only outside powers that are trying to increase their foothold in the Gaza Strip. Turkey is also pressuring hard to be part of the multinational stabilization force that is supposed to be the key element in phase 2 of the ceasefire plan. However, the spokeswoman for the Prime Minister's office clarified that Jerusalem opposes the deployment of Turkish soldiers as part of a multinational force in the Gaza Strip, as Turkey is not a partner to any political or security move with Israel. In the northern arena, after a wave of extensive strikes against Hezbollah targets, Saudi reports say that senior members of the terrorist organization are trying to hide from the IDF and have even underwent plastic surgeries to disguise their faces. A look at recent events in the Gaza Strip. The IDF forces from Division 36, together with the Yalam fighters, have operated in recent weeks in the Khan Yunis area to locate and to destroy terrorist infrastructure, and during the operation, 4 underground routes and dozens of structures that are used by terrorists were destroyed. It was also announced on Sunday that after 2 months of fighting, the mission of the Harel Brigade forces in the Yellow Line area in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip was completed. And during the fighting, the forces eliminated dozens of terrorists who posed a threat to them in the area and also destroyed hundreds of above and underground terrorist infrastructure. In one of the activities, the forces located a Hamas terror tunnel and a shaft in the Yellow Line area in Khan Yunis. In addition, dozens of weapons were located, including Hamas observation equipment. So, the IDF statement that the Southern Command forces continue to operate in the Yellow Line area to remove any immediate threat to our forces and to the citizens of the State of Israel. In related news, the Hamas terrorist organization announced recently that it had located the remains of Hadar Goldin in Rafah, and on Sunday evening, they returned these remains over to the Red Cross, and subsequently they were delivered to Israel, where an examination of them determined that they were actually Goldin's remains. So, it was also reported that during their search of the remains of Goldin, they also found the remains of 6 terrorists who belonged to the organization's military wing and were eliminated in circumstances that were unclear. The sources hinted that these were shadow unit operatives who apparently oversaw the site in the Yibina camp in the city in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip and lost their lives during this war. However, we need to remember that Hamas is an organization with some special units whose job is to enforce internal discipline, so to speak, so that these terrorists whose remains were found in the tunnel near the remains of Goldin might have lost their lives in some kind of an internal turf war. We'll probably never know the full story and what happened at that location, but what we do know is that while Hamas terrorists pretended to be searching and knew in advance where the captive fallen was held, Shayetet 13 commandos and other special forces of the IDF operated along an underground route in Rafah to locate the body of Lieutenant Hadar Goldin. This was first revealed on Sunday evening in the Israeli media, and the special operations carried out during Division 162nd activities to take control of the area were prolonged and included a long stay and operations based on intelligence information. In addition, it was reported that Goldin's personal weapon, which was returned to his family, was found near the remains of the Rafah Brigadier Commander Muhammad Sabana after he was eliminated in the underground route near the European hospital in Khan Yunis alongside Muhammad Sinwar. Now that Goldin's remains have also been returned to the family, his weapon will be sent to a museum as part of an exhibit dedicated to telling his story and the stories of other hostages. Speaking of stories, the story of around 150 Hamas terrorists that are trapped in tunnels in two areas in the Khan Yunis area and in the Rafah area is something that could accompany us in additional areas throughout the entire period of the agreements. While we are indeed in the final stage of Phase A, in which Hamas terrorists are supposed to release all the hostages who are in their possession within 72 hours, here we are almost 1 month later and the process is still not complete. All the living hostages were released within a period of 3 hours during the American president's visit to the country, but since then, every day or every 2 or 3 days, the remains of the fallen have been released in small groups, and now there are still 5 individuals, 4 Israelis and 1 foreign worker who are unaccounted for. As of yesterday afternoon, it was clear to the defense establishment that in light of the pressure applied, the body of Hadar Goldin had been found, and Hamas even made sure to document this event, but since then, there have been no announcement of other remains to be released. Hamas constantly tries to link this moving event and exploits it to the fullest in order to secure the release of the terrorists in the tunnels, despite the fact that 3 IDF soldiers lost their lives and several others were wounded in recent weeks from attacks by these terrorists. Hamas wants their release, and the mediators, led by the United States, want it as well, so as not to disrupt the pace of the ceasefire agreement. However, Israeli officials have said that they must not give into this pressure. Instead, Israeli officials say that they are working on an alternative plan that would encourage the trapped terrorists to surrender and be taken for questioning, but this common sense proposal is seen by Hamas as an insult to their so-called honor, and they are refusing it so far. The Americans see the terrorists remaining in the Rafah tunnels as a focal point of tension that led to 2 severe escalations and undermined the ceasefire agreement, and they want to defuse this situation so the overall plan can move forward. And senior American officials say that the Trump administration also conveyed to Israel the message that this event can be turned into a kind of pilot project to disarm Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Senior American officials say that the primary direction now for resolving the Rafah terrorist crisis is their temporary exile to a third country. However, according to them, a country willing to receive these terrorists has not yet been found. And according to the outline that is being formulated by the United States and by Turkey, the terrorists in Rafah will commit not to return to terror, hand over their weapons, and receive a pardon from Israel. They will then be restricted to a third country for a period of several years, the length of which is still being negotiated. If these terrorists do not return to terror, they will be able to return to Gaza at the end of the exile period. And during the talks between the United States and Israel, the Americans emphasized that if Israel does not agree to this outline and insists on eliminating or arresting these terrorists, it will send a message to all the other Hamas members in the Gaza Strip that they have no option other than to return to war, because in any case Israel will not grant them pardon, even if they lay down their arms and surrender. I'm very curious, what do you think about all of this? Let me know in the comments section. And for their part, Hamas's military wing issued a statement on Sunday morning addressing this issue directly for the first time. In their statement, they declared that Israel bears full responsibility for the clashes with our fighters in Rafah, who are defending themselves inside an area under its control. It must be made clear to the enemy that the principle of surrender and submitting to the enemy does not exist in the lexicon of the Al-Qassam brigades, according to Hamas officials. The source also noted that Hamas has a certain difficulty in returning some of the 4 captive fallen and the remains that are in his hands, but he also said that it is not Hamas's fault. And to make a brief comment of my own, we know that the Hamas terrorist organization always lies, and so there's nothing surprising in this comment. And right now, in Gaza, there are still the remains of 4 fallen captives: police officer Ran Gueli, Meni Godard, and Dror Or from Kibbutz Be'eri, as well as Suditak Rehankatak, a Thai citizen who was abducted from the Be'eri area. So guys, keep spreading the truth, share and follow us. Most importantly, don't forget to hit this subscribe button